Hey, everybody, it's your host, Marlon Gardenera. You're tuned in to the Divided States of America show. We're here weekdays, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, taking on the most divisive issues in our divided nation. Unfortunately, that means just about any and everything because we are as divided as you could be. On today's show, more Trump. I'm not trying to get caught up in the Trump trap, but when he's at the top of the news, that's what people are talking about. That's what the comments are coming in about. So we can't ignore the obvious. We'll add in defunding the FBI, which there was a call for yesterday. I thought was pretty funny and ironic, and a little bit more about the economy. You're living it. Obviously, I'm curious what that experience is like for you and where you think it's going. We'll talk about all of this on today's Divided States of America show.
Welcome to the Divided States of America show, where your host, Marlon Gardenera, takes on the most divisive issues in our divided nation. We'll sort through the best and worst of politics and culture, asking questions and looking for answers that our two-ring, two-party circus has failed to provide. And here is your host, Marlon Gardenera.
The time to tune in. The comments have been picking up. Go to our Facebook group, facebook.com/the DSA show. People will let you know what they really think. Unfortunately, they like to do it online. I can't say that they're anonymous. Most of the commenting is happening on Facebook, but they have very, very strong opinions. I do my best to get there and question them all. Doesn't matter which side you're coming from. The more rhetoric, the more animated, the more emotional they are, it tends to motivate me to ask more questions. I'm not doing it from a bad place. I'm not doing it questioning your motivation, your incentive, your thoughts. I'm really trying to understand. I don't get America today. I just don't understand where we're at. It doesn't always make sense, but I want to talk about it. I want to talk about it here again, weekdays, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and Twitter. I appreciate those of you who've taken the time again to be here. Let's just get started with the obvious. Gas prices are down about $1 over the last month. The Democrats are celebrating like it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, although gas prices are still higher than they obviously have been. I guess they go back to last March is when we saw prices at this level. I understand the factors in between. If you go on social media, people are leaving those factors out. They don't seem to care. It is what it is. Somebody's responsible, so they're pointing the finger. The people they're pointing the finger out are pointing to the things that they believe are the actual reason. At the end of the day, most Americans are just having to deal with it, pay for the extra fuel, the extra cost for fuel. How is that impacting you? And I ask that because of this. For a while, we were plowing right through inflation. And by that, I mean, we were using as much fuel, we were traveling as far. We had no regard for the fact that things were more expensive. And oftentimes what happens, basic supply and demand, when things are more expensive, we do less of it. And I'm sure the pandemic, as much as it is impacting supply and demand, the supply chain, the labor markets, it obviously reached down to gas prices. Obviously, Ukraine reached into gas prices, changes in production, refineries. There's so many factors, but people literally, when they're throwing back and forth the volley of hate, they leave all the details out. But some of the details as it relates to the last month, it's down $1 in a month. I don't know if you're celebrating because it's still expensive. I know in some places it's under $4 in California. We're still hovering right around $5, trying to get to the $4.99 mark, if nothing else. But what's finally started to happen, and this is how economies work, and for those people who like to just go supply and demand, at times they blame it on the government and then they leave out supply and demand. And then there's times when they say government stay out of it, let the market take care of itself. Well, the market is starting to respond. People are using a little bit less fuel. When you use less fuel in a typical scenario, they either don't produce as much, which I don't think they're ready to change production just based on trends on a very short period of time, but they start to discount it. They start, one, to try to attract people to it, get people to go ahead and spend for it, but they don't want excess inventory. There's just so many factors involved. But until we stop plowing right through inflation, Nothing was going to change. We ultimately, at the end of every day, don't need to rely on a politician to make decisions for us. If you want gas prices to go down, stop using it. I can assure you they'll go down. If you want the price at your local Macy's to go down, stop buying products for a little while, and I guarantee you they'll start putting things on clearance. They'll start stacking up inventory and start to concern themselves with their financials. And rather than profiteering, and I'm not trying to point out Macy's, but this is the general nature of business, when people know that you can get a little bit more for something, they charge it. And if something costs them 10 cents more, they may take advantage of it and try to charge you 15% or 20 cents more. And I don't begrudge people for running the business any way they want to, but ultimately the market can respond. The people can respond. We don't have the type of leadership where we do it in a coordinated fashion. We don't have the type of leadership where we stand by each other to make positive things happen in our society. But boy, it would be nice if we would. We wouldn't have to rely on politicians as much if we were more united in our thoughts and our direction. But I guess it's so much easier to hate each other than it is to do anything else. Now, gas prices are coming down. Inflation is slightly down. Again, the Democrats are touting it as if, something they did in particular has made that happen. They'll certainly be touting the Inflation Reduction Act should the House pass it today or tomorrow. I believe they're looking at that tomorrow. And they'll say that that's the reason it's going down. Just don't forget, we impact it more than anything else. If we want it to go down, we can have that impact on our economy. Now, interest rates have gone up, so home buying has slowed. You're paying approximately 50% more for a mortgage based on the doubling of interest rates from the 2.25% some people were paying to the fact that it's hovering closer to 5%. That is going to temper prices. It's going to temper the velocity of sales. Now, if you're a homeowner and you were looking to sell, you missed the best window when interest rates were at their lowest and prices were still going and houses were selling at absurd prices. If you were looking to cash out, that was probably the best time. Now we're starting to get into more realistic interest rate numbers. 5% is not the percentages we were paying in the 80s. It's expensive, and who wants homes to be more expensive? They're not affordable as it is. But they did that obviously to slow things down, to get people to stop, to get investors to stop saying, hey, at 2.25%, I can take money from that investment, put it in that investment. That investment will continue to grow at this rate, and I'm only paying that rate. So investors are sweeping up the properties, making it harder for the people that go to work in your neighborhood to buy the homes. All of these things go together, but again, they're people-centric. We could impact more of these things. The reliance we have on our politicians and the two sides to resolve these issues when we know in many cases they're not even willing to talk, it's just absurd. We really, at the end of the day, don't have anybody to blame but ourselves. So I'm going to keep digging, and I'm going to keep pushing, and I'm going to keep looking at why we go after each other instead of why we go with each other to try to make more positive things happen. With home prices going down, mortgages going up, well, we have to wonder what it'll do to the rental market. But as prices come back down, you go to a site like Zillow or Redfin or these places, and they tell you what the suggested rent is. And then you look at what people are actually charging for the rent, and you realize there's an immediate disconnect. It's $500, $600, $700 more every time. And it's crazy. Again, not to point out those two as opposed to the general theory that people are just taking advantage of the fact that things cost more. And when you're talking about necessities, you're going to get it. People have to rent homes. They have to live somewhere. So they're going after it. But obviously, rental prices coming down take a little bit longer. I'm looking for the positives. I'm trying to find joy. I like a good joy story where one exists. And if the price changes, make it possible for one more meal or one more activity, a kid to take a dance class or a kid to get a tutor. If any of the changes have that effect, I'm okay with them. So as you watch politicians talk about they're doing a great job, look, they're going down, not mentioning why they went up. Or on the other side, you say, don't be happy with that. It's not enough. You still have to wonder, are they talking to each other to make it better? And we already know the answer. They're not. But let's celebrate when anything goes our way, because so many things right now aren't. We just hope they start going faster. Gas prices, though, we know that there's been a slight increase in oil production. We know Biden met with OPEC. OPEC did a token gesture of an increase of production. But again, people are in it for the money. OPEC nations don't want to see oil prices go down. They do much better when oil prices are higher. They don't have any motivation to increase production and help lower costs. Their motivation is to try to strike a balance where they make as much money as possible, serve the needs out there so that other people don't drill, that other people don't come up with the fuel shortages or fill in the gap that they're not. But people have their own motivations. unless we're united, we are not as strong. We can't get as much done. It's just that simple. It really is. If we count on politicians to bridge that gap, it will never be bridged. If you count on politicians to bridge the gap, it'll never be bridged. We have to step in that void. Slight increase in oil production. OPEC with a token increase in oil production. The biggest hit has been demand has slowed down, so prices will start to reflect that. Again, the power actually comes from us. It comes from us. We don't take advantage of it. We just argue with each other. We hope the downward trend continues. I think they're estimating another 20 to 30 cent drop over the next month. Then you have to start to worry about the seasonal effects of winter and heating oils and the different costs associated with the changes in season. It just doesn't stop. But as long as we're not working together, how could it? In the news, we're coming up on the 5-year anniversary of Charlottesville. We're coming up on the anniversary of hate. We're coming up on the anniversary of fighting and rioting and separation and people going after Jews and blacks and the others and the others standing up for themselves and the scuffles and things that come with it. I mentioned yesterday there are places in America where critical race theory, although it's not taught in public schools, it was something developed for college. Critical race theory is a bad word. We cannot take a critical look at race, even though we know it's dead center on some of the issues in our lives. We talked about it yesterday. A young lady came on and said part of the appeal of Donald Trump for a lot of people is the social capital he gives them by being white. That blew my mind. I'm going to put a post up on Facebook. It'll be in our group. I can tell you in advance, I already know people are going to be coming out in groves to give their feedback on that. It's just the way it works, folks. I'm going to play that video a little bit later because I don't want you to forget it, and I want people thinking about it. And quite frankly, I want people talking about it, and I don't want them glancing over it. I want them to be honest. Some people are going to say, no, I think that's absurd. Some people are going to say, it's not me. But I do think that the appeal for some people is that Trump does represent them. He looks like them. He feels like they're fighting for them. So, of course, they're going to be behind him. They may not be able to tell you specifically what he's done for them, but of course, in theory, they're going to be behind him. And I have a confession. After doing that show yesterday, I felt bad. I felt bad because I'm not looking for white guilt. That's silly. Half my family's white. I've got a lot of white in my life. I was looking for the reality and trying to find reasons that the support for Trump is so strong. And for people who can't articulate why, a young lady threw something out. She suggested that it was white supremacy. It was that feeling that he keeps them in power on top. He is their identity. He is their strength when they feel like they're otherwise losing it. And as we come up on the 5-year celebration for Charlottesville, when the KKK was saying Jews will not replace us, and then you hear people talking about the great replacement theory, thinking that they want to let illegal immigrants in. So again, the numbers of the white majority shrinks, and they lose that power. These are real things that are happening today. But we don't want to have critical discussions about them. That just seems silly to me. Slavery was from before. You're not a slave. I'm not a slave owner. Why do we have to talk about it? That was a culture that was created in America, and we have not shaken that culture completely. We have not. We've made considerable progress. I don't have that problem with my friends. I take that back. I have one friend who we had a conflict. He didn't like something that someone on my staff did. So it seemed as if we had become adversaries, and the last thing he said to me was the N-word. It's only been said to me twice in my life. It's a reflection of how people think they can talk to one another. People don't call me boy. People don't use the N-word on me. They don't. Respect, fear, common sense, courtesy. I don't care. It doesn't make any difference. We've evolved to the point where you can't just do that. It's not going to fly. There will be a repercussion. It's not going to fly. But we're not all the way there. So we are dealing with that question. Is Trump, or part of his appeal, white supremacy? The feeling he gives people who may not economically have much capital. They're not investing the way she described it in the video, dilapidated housing. Maybe they don't have health care or dental care. We're going to show that video again. We'll do that a little bit later. But at the 5-year anniversary of Charlottesville, is Charlottesville any better off than they were before? I know people in Charlottesville were saying that wasn't us. That was people coming from everywhere. But the history in Charlottesville is also very clear. Are they evolving? Have they moved on from the 5 years? Have you moved on from that moment 5 years ago? What were your thoughts before, during, and have they evolved and changed after? I'll be looking for those comments, particularly on our Facebook group. Facebook.com/the The DSA Show. Best place to add your comments. If you have comments on YouTube, I can see them on the screen. I can add them up if you want to add anything while we're actually on air. Another one, regional, but on the same topic. Faneuil Hall in Boston. If you've ever been, everybody knows about Faneuil Hall. It is a tourist attraction. It gets people's attention. There's a push right now to change the name. And this is happening all over the place. I guess you could call it part of the cancel culture. You're definitely going to get people who jump in and say, it's part of history, accept it. I accept history, not looking to hide it. If it's a private business, they can do what they want. If people want to boycott a private business, they can do that too. All of these options are yours to have. Again, ultimately, we are in control. The people get to decide how these things work out. We elevate it, it reaches politics, it turns ugly, it becomes silly. It really can become silly as it gets to that point. But the discussion is being had in Boston. The protest is happening. People are walking inside protesting. There is obviously a disruption. And the goal is to change the name. Faneuil was a slave trader. He owned and traded and bought and sold people. And sometimes people say, well, it was what was going on at the time. I got to think that people understand the difference between right or wrong, and they can't go so far as to justify everything in their heads. We obviously know that to be the case. There were lots of people for the abolition of slavery. Our leadership, at least half of it, was for it. The South was against it. And I got to tell you, one of the topics I'm going to cover, and I'll just throw this out there so that you keep this in mind. Why are people mad about Colin Kaepernick taking a knee for the national anthem, but they don't have a problem with the Confederate flag? Wasn't that an affront to our nation? After the national anthem was written, and the song of our nation, the national anthem of our country? Why are some things that go against the grain of what people believe are patriotism bad, horrible, horrendous, and some trying to divide our nation, trying to fight against our nation, killing people who were for our nation, something that people give a pass to? Another day, another topic. But Faneuil Hall, Boston, they want to change the name. How do you feel about those sort of things? And I always use this as an example. There were people who liked Hitler. There were people who probably still support him. There are people now who fall into the neo-Nazi category and believe that the world should be white and that the power structure should be white. And I've told you, I think I even said it yesterday, yeah, I don't care what you think. That's okay. Believe what you want. It doesn't make a difference to me up until you try to impose what you believe on me or people that look like me. Then we cross that line, and that line applies to almost anything. You can believe, think, say, talk, act any way you want to until that line crosses over and infringes on someone else's life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And the same freedoms that the right is screaming for, the left should have as it relates to the protection of their livelihoods and the protection of their basic needs, their education, all the things that people look forward to in life. All of those things should still exist. But they want to change that name. Join us on our Facebook group. It'll be there. Curious what people think about the changing of the name of Faneuil Hall, or for that matter, holding anyone who was a slaveholder accountable for their actions, not such that you eliminate them from history, but you stop celebrating them. If you had a lineage of people who had been raped, would you celebrate them? And I mean that with some sincerity. If you knew your ancestors for generations were raped, and the person or people or family name or legacy of those people exists today in a form of celebration and popularity, how would you feel? I've not traced my lineage all the way back, so I can't tell you specific stories. I have to believe, based on the color of my skin, I know when half of my family got to America. It was for the most part after that. But I know the other half, I believe, was here before. Would I have to trace the lineage down to a specific person and talk about that specific person's acts before I celebrate that family name or that family's legacy or that family's presence in our society in 2022? And would it have to be something like that before enough people would actually consider what it would be? I don't need to cancel anybody. They existed. Their role in history existed. But the idea of celebrating it does seem weird to me. When people commit atrocities, you don't have to celebrate them. Private businesses, if that's their choice, they can. They can. They have that right. Museums, private places, of course. Do I want government-funded celebration of rapists? No, I'm all set. Thank you, though. buying and selling babies, separating families. Do I want to celebrate that? No. Not trying to erase the history. I'm trying to say, hey, look at that history. Is that something you want to celebrate as part of the identity of this nation? It's part of the history, but the things we display and do today are part of our identity today. Do we want to carry that forward as if it's always positive and something that we should celebrate? There's no other way to say it. Is it something we should celebrate? And then here's the reality. It's Trump, Trump, Trump again. I don't want to get caught up in that. I have strong feelings. I told you I balance those feelings in relation to explaining what happens to my children. I don't have to explain an 80-year-old man falling off a bicycle to my children. They understand that 80-year-old men lose their balance. And they too could have questions. Hey, if he can't ride a bike, can he run a country? That's fair. Those types of questions are okay. I don't know that I see a direct correlation between the two, but maybe there is. Maybe that question, maybe those concerns come up more often. But what I'd rather my children do is have respect for 80-year-olds. 80-year-olds active enough to still try to ride bikes. My mother-in-law just turned 80. Happy birthday. What I would like them to have for 80-year-olds is respect. And I don't always agree with my mother-in-law. Imagine that. Typical story in America. Typical story around the world. I don't have animus. We don't hate each other. Nothing like that. But we don't always agree. But do you think that my children should think that disrespect for them because of our disagreements is okay? That's the society we live in. That's the celebration you see on social media. My favorite is when they're taking the pictures in the spot that he fell. If your 80-year-old relative falls, can we take pictures and celebrate it? Just that basic decency that we used to have in America. Basic decency. Sometimes I have a hard time finding it. The masses have it, but the loudest people often tend not to. The people you hear the most often tend not to. The people others follow the most tend not to. Both sides. Just disrespect. Blatant, flat out disrespect. Obviously, top of the news is the raids still. I love some of the feedback. I love it. It just fascinates me. Steven Crowder, popular guy. We don't agree on a lot of things, but he's definitely entertaining. If I didn't want to fill in some of the blanks with my own research and my own thought, I could see how I could be entertained, particularly if my natural inclination was to believe the types of things he believes. I would find him incredibly entertaining. I'm entertained. I'm entertained at the ability to go down one path with a blind disregard for the other. And don't get me wrong, the mainstream media does it too. But when you say something like this, tomorrow is war, sleep well. It doesn't even matter what it's about. Who are we going to war with in America? Who are you looking to kill and die for in America today? What disadvantage or challenge or struggle is worth war for you today in America? Which one? Contrast that to an illegal immigrant, undocumented migrant coming across the border 20 miles from me here in San Diego, Tijuana, largest border crossing in America. They're not looking to go to war. They're looking to go to work. And we talk about them like they're animals. They're looking to go to work, not war. Is feeding your family, hoping for better healthcare and education, even though you're potentially breaking the law, because America, you can't do that. And I'm okay with deportation, and I'm okay strengthening the Border Patrol and strengthening the methods that we use to maintain our security, to maintain the sovereignty of America. I don't have a problem with those things. We don't have an open border. The Border Patrol is there right now. I don't disrespect their presence today because they're there. They're there doing their job. They're risking their lives. They're there. People talk like they're not there, but they are. They talk like Biden said, removed the whole Border Patrol, took down all the fences. That's nonsense. But that's just the volleying in politics. But who are we looking to go to war with in America today? What challenge are you describing that you think you should go to war over? We saw people try to stop an election certification. That seems like a thing for people. They thought it was worth fighting for. But Steven Crowder, your audience, what is worth fighting for in America today? Who are you willing to kill to get your way in America today? What cause are you willing to die for in America today? Because I'm assuming he wasn't talking about going to war in the foreign territory. I'm sure he wasn't. I can't be sure, but fairly certain, I can say. What are we going to war about? What are you worried about? What challenge are you facing? What thing are you dealing with that is so bad that we all need to be prepared to go deal with it? Quite the following. There's a lot of people who probably heard that and thought, yeah, we need to be ready to go to war. With who? Just curious. Same day, Ted Cruz chimed in. Listen, I still don't understand a man who can support another man who talked about his wife like an animal. Disrespectful to his wife, and you deliver his messages, and maybe respectfully they're your messages. I can't know for certain, so I need to be more respectful in that regard. But Ted Cruz 2 days ago said the FBI raiding Donald Trump is unprecedented. It is. His crimes could be too. And if there are crimes or things worth investigating, are you going to get on and say it's unprecedented that we have a criminal former president if those things bear out? I'm guessing probably not. Not unless the political winds shift and it becomes personally beneficial for him to say that. Anyway, he moves on to say it's corrupt and an abuse of power. Whose power was abused? What law was broken? What evidence do you have of any of that? We covered this, but I'm just dumbfounded that our leadership does this on purpose. They know people are going to believe what they say. They know people are going to follow them, yet they don't have the information to do it. He said what Nixon tried to do, Biden has now implemented. The Biden admin has fully weaponized the DOJ and FBI to target their political enemies. What if it's not true? Are you going to take those words back? Are you going to take those words back? Are you going to try to undo what you did to garner support? Maybe you had tied it to a fundraiser. I don't know. Are you going to be real and fair to your followers if you're wrong? And are you going to apologize to the rest of the Americans who, you didn't even consider the potential that the outcome of this is something they concern themselves with? It's so ugly. Our politics are so ugly. Our politicians have the ability to be so ugly. On this issue, I don't know. I think some Democrats took down their celebration and their presumption that Trump was guilty because you're not seeing as much up there as you had been before. You're just not. It's like that at some points they get accused to just be quiet and let this one ride out. Don't be a part of it. Don't fan the flames. Don't join in making wild assumptions. But don't get me wrong. There are plenty of Democrats who are equally absurd in their reactions to lots of things. They do it regularly. They do it without question. They do. They do. It's pretty bad. I listened to Clay Travis this morning. Clay Travis and Buck Sexton. In many markets, they filled in for the departed Rush Limbaugh. God rest his soul. May not agree with him, but he was a human being. He was a life. He had family. People cared. I don't have to hate people to make any progress at all. Don't have to hate them at all. Boy, it'd be nice if everybody understood that. Clay Travis, 14 hours ago. So the president with the lowest approval rating in our lives just had his Department of Justice raid the private home of the leading candidate to replace him in the next election. This is a banana republic, third world level, and scary. Excuse me. What if you're wrong? Will we still be a banana republic if you're wrong? Will you issue an apology to Biden if he didn't know? If someone could prove and lay out those facts, would you take ownership? Would you be accountable? I don't know if the president can sue someone for slander or libel. Would you understood if he did? Clearly, the Sandy Hook family's things worked out. Alex Jones, $45 million in punitive damages, $4 million, if I remember correctly, in compensatory. Can we hold people accountable for how wrong they are and the impact of the people they lead? We can't hold them accountable for free speech. That is not fair. People are free to say whatever they want. But when they maliciously and with intent try to do harm to someone else, are you crossing that line where a person could stand up and say, you went too far, it was not true, you tried to do harm, I'm suing you? If Biden didn't have the Justice Department raid the home of former President Donald Trump, will people be accountable for that? The latest news is something that I shared yesterday. Newsweek reported an informant let law enforcement know that there were more boxes, and this is where they are. And the report that I've heard is 12 more boxes came out. I heard Clay Travis or Buck Sexton say earlier that there's been no negotiations from the time they removed the first boxes until now. And then I read reports that there had been, and those things went sour. Which one is it? What I know for certain is that you and I aren't positive. And if you are, jump on the show and let me know. I don't know that Clay Travis or Buck Sexton has a very clear path to the absolute information as to whether or not there were talks between A and B. There's a report out that says there was. Clay Travis and Buck Sexton said there was no contact. They went from him cooperating and giving them information they needed to raiding his house. Now, I don't know the investigative tactics. I don't know the investigators. I don't know the rules they were following. I just have to use common sense and think that I can't imagine that they went from cooperation to raid. Maybe they did. I can't speak for them and tell you what would motivate them to do that. I would imagine in due time that stuff starts to happen on its own. I don't know if they tell you everything about an investigation when they start. I don't know when the police are looking into something they call ahead and say, hey, we're looking into this. Start, dotting the I's and crossing the T's and hiding evidence. Just want to give you a heads up about what we're going to do. Obviously, there needs to be accountability. They need to speak up. But I just keep wondering, from the volleys that are going back and forth and the hate, and particularly from our leadership that should be setting an example of patience and restraint, what are they going to do if they're wrong? If they're right and it was a guess, hey, good. It was just good luck. But I want them to be more certain than that if they're leading our nation. But if your sole motivation for leading our nation is your party, if your sole motivation is to get people who believe what you believe in large numbers just for an advertisers, hey, go make that money. Do you ever stop and pause and go, what if I wasn't right? I constantly do that here, and I want you to hold me accountable for those types of things here. It's just the reality. I have opinions. I have thoughts. Some of them are based purely on speculation. Some of them I am thoughtful and say I don't know. I'll give you an idea. I'll try to give you the contrasting idea, but they're just thoughts, and it's weird. It's so weird. It's so weird where we go, how quickly we get there, and how comfortable we are when we get there. It, to me, again, is why this nation is divided. There's no question for me. Trump said something a couple years ago about the mob and the reason they plead the fifth, and something to the effects of, if you have nothing to hide, speak. Do people think he should do the same? He pleaded the fifth, I guess, hundreds of times in his brief, although it wasn't brief. It went on for hours. They kept asking the questions, and he just kept pleading the fifth. I said yesterday he is not guilty in that case yet or never. The presumption of guilt you're not going to get from me. Sometimes it's pretty obvious. Sometimes you can go down that road and feel confident that a person is guilty. And then there's a lot of times you're just hoping, and you're taking and replacing your hope for facts, and you say things that may not be true. I'm not presuming he has any guilt in any aspect of any of the things. I'm hoping it's a lawful investigation. Everybody involved understood the consequences of raiding the house of a former president, and that threshold was met in order for them to get there. But pleading the fifth in another investigation about his finances, where there is an assumption by some that he was inflating his income to get loans, deflating it to pay taxes. The reconciliation of that is something that the New York District Attorney is looking into, and that trial would be, you would imagine, would be coming down the line as they go through this investigation. There's a grand jury, all of the details. He kept pleading the fifth. There was a time when he said people should speak up if they're innocent. I can say with a fair level of comfort, the amount of Republicans willing to hold him accountable has always been low, and I don't get why. And I'm not saying that there isn't a reason. I would just like to hear it. I'd like to explain to my children what the reason was that in moments and times when we knew something was wrong, there was almost no accountability from a significant majority of the right. Why did that happen? What about it made that happen? What made you say, was it an excuse? Was it a valid excuse? Was it a strong belief in something? I told you, the lady said yesterday, was it white supremacy? You're not willing to give up his power because you think it affects your power? What was it that had that effect? Really? I had an exchange yesterday on Twitter. I try to have exchanges regularly. I like the conversations. I like to have the conversations. This one was with a lady by the name of Lillian Simpson. I know you can't see that. Let me make it a little bigger for you. She said, "Damn disgrace. I hope whoever ordered that raid is held accountable. If it was right, will they be commended? If it's wrong, I am with you, Lillian. I too hope that they are held accountable. If anybody lied to make it happen, if they handed in false testimony, bad evidence, if there's anything wrong with the process that they had to go through to get the warrant to search Mar-a-Lago, I too hope they are held accountable. Period. End of sentence." So I wrote back, though, in trying to elicit answers, has it ever crossed your mind that Trump is being held accountable and isn't above the law? That same accountability she's looking for the people who ordered the raid, is it possible that they are making an attempt to hold him accountable for breaking the law? And quite frankly, the law that he may have re-signed into law, Citizen Trump may be held to a standard he signed into law as President Trump. We'll get into that another day. But why is accountability a one-way street? Why are people talking about the accountability of the investigators instead of the investigatee? How do we get to a place where you skip over the credibility of the Republicans in the FBI? Have they all turned to conspiracies themselves and just participated in the conspiracy, even though they may have voted for him? Is that really what people think? Come on, that can't be. So someone responded to this thread and said, "God forbid we investigate criminals. There's a presumption of criminals. I could think they could have stopped it. God forbid we investigate." And then Lillian Simpson jumped back in and said, "And you would know that how?" You don't. That's why you investigate. You're looking to hold the investigators accountable, and you don't even know what information they had, where it came from, how valid it was, what process they went through to get the warrant, and what the outcome of the investigation is going to be. You have already decided he is innocent, which is fair. Okay, you are until you're proven guilty, but you're taking people on as if you know it to be fact. You don't. You don't. I'm going to play that video now. I'm curious. Is the unbelievable support of Trump, even when people know something is wrong, and I don't mean all things, maybe one particular issue, is that continual support a reflection of anything related to white supremacy? I'm going to play this video just because I'm fascinated that this even, somebody said it. Somebody finally said it. I'm looking for people with the courage to speak their truth about Donald Trump. This person said it. I commend this person for saying it. I'm going to play it again just because I thought it was powerful in that someone actually just said what they thought. Here it is.
My husband sometimes asks me questions about politics because I follow it very closely, and he does not. He does not follow the day-by-day, minute-by-minute updates. So after he watched the January 6th committee hearings, a replay of it, he came to me and he was super confused, and he said, they showed video of insurrectionists on January 6th telling the camera that, yes, they are willing to lay down their lives for Donald Trump because Donald Trump has done so much for them that this is the least they could do for him. And so my husband said, what exactly has Donald Trump done for them to make them react in this extreme way? It's not like they're in the top 1% and he's giving them like permanent tax cuts. So I'll tell you what I told him. For some poor white people, obviously they don't have a lot of capital for whatever reason. They don't have money in the bank. They don't have investments. So the only form of capital that they have that they can hang their hat on is social capital. What does that mean? It means white supremacy. They might be living in a dilapidated house. They might not have been able to afford a dentist. Let's just keep it real. But at least they're not those people. So when Donald Trump comes out and makes them feel superior to Muslims, people coming over the border, they sit back and they say, that's right, I am superior. And that's all they need from Donald Trump. That's all they need. It doesn't matter that Donald Trump is grifting them. When Donald Trump says, hey, send me money and me and my friends will build the border wall, and they do, and then Steve Bannon steals the money, and then Donald Trump pardons him, none of that matters. It's why Donald Trump is part of their identity. Because Donald Trump validates their whiteness. And that's all they have to bank on, is the hierarchy that so many of us are trying to break down. That's the only thing making them feel like they're worth something. And that alone is enough for them to storm the Capitol and say, yes, I will lay down my life for this man. So when people like me say, why are you voting against your own interests? They would say, we're not.
Here she is. She said it. The point of this show, again, I would love to have nothing but Trump fans tell us their truth. I'd love nothing more than the balance of not having to go to the mainstream media and hear all the reasons they hate him, or going to the right-wing media and listen to all of the things that they won't even discuss. I want that thing in the middle where the discussions actually happen. That's the point for me. I couldn't have a two-way discussion with her. No, I haven't reached out to her, but she spoke. She made it very clear. She put her face right there behind her words and said, hey, I think it might be this. What do you think? Again, I said yesterday, do I think Trump's a racist? I don't know. I'm not here claiming he's a racist. I know he didn't fight against it. I know he didn't say, if you're racist, don't vote for me. If you have extreme views about Jews or the minorities in our country, they're Americans. I don't want your support. Those would have been very strong words. And maybe he did say it and I missed it. If he did, I apologize. But I think it could have been said much more frequently. It needed to be said so many times that the people who actually felt that way started to dislike him. That would be leadership. That would be a leader of America that I could get behind. Even if we didn't agree politically on a list of things, if I knew that they would take a stand and do the right thing for all Americans and it wasn't just about their supporters, that's somebody I could get behind. I could get behind that. Here's another concept to potentially get behind. Now, it's not fair to use this person often because there's some element of, I don't know, trying to get attention, or maybe she just really believes all the things she says, but it shocks me. But the support was, at least in this case from 2 days ago, at least 115,000 people strong. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Here's her comments after hearing about the raid on Twitter. Defund the FBI. Oh, boy. When there was talk about defunding the police, they were trying to attack a systemic issue where they knew that justice was not carried out equally. They knew there was bias. They knew there was bias in bail, in sentencing, in being arrested, policing in general. There's a long list of things that we could say very specifically we want adjustment to this. I was never for defunding the police. Never. Didn't make sense. We still have crime. We need to do more to stop it. We need to do more to help people. Did I have a problem with the dollars going in line with where the help was needed? If your police department responds and 40% of the calls are for mental health issues, do I think 30% of the budget should go there to address that? Sure, if that's going to lower the crime rate, if that's going to keep people from that situation from getting worse and crimes from being committed and people being affected and harmed, sure. Did you have to defund the police? Well, no, if the police are equipped to handle that, not at all. The idea to defund the police as punishment, I thought that was stupid. That's nonsense. And anybody who said defund the police to punish them, they're not doing a good enough job, take away the money, that wasn't the point. And if you were being patient, if you showed restraint, you could see through the rhetoric being thrown back and forth, and you would understand that wasn't exactly the point of defunding the police. It was saying an armed officer that has very little mental health training is not equipped to go to somebody who's out of their right mind. That officer is equipped to keep that person from harming other people. No question. And you got to fund the officers to make sure they're there to do that job. And you better thank them because it's a risky situation. But if one of the better solutions would be a mental health professional that could bring that person to a better place, could help de-escalate the situation, do we need to fund that? Yes. Do we need to find the money somewhere else? That's a discussion in the local town hall. That's a discussion in your city in relation to the things that the police officers have to respond to, in relation to the reports that they write where they say the person was out of their mind. These are the steps that I knew to take. And maybe that wasn't enough. We need to be able to take additional steps. Doesn't need to be their county mental health. Doesn't need to be another agency. The point is, it doesn't matter who it has to be if we're working to make America better for people. Doesn't matter. But defund the police as a whole sounded silly. And I'm guessing Marjorie Taylor Greene thought that was an absurd idea. Yet we find ourselves in a situation where one person's home was raided. One person. Are you trying to tell me that one person, and maybe even through a miscarriage of justice and an abuse of political power, is the thing that gets you to want to defund the FBI? But I know we can't go back and find a list of texts from you trying to say reallocate funds to our local police departments because of injustices against minorities. It took one person being in a bad spot before it mattered to you funding of law enforcement. One person. I'll be honest, I'd like to meet this guy. I want to meet Donald Trump. I want to sit down and have a conversation. I don't want it to be recorded so we could be honest. I'll sign non-disclosures. I'll do whatever it takes to sit down and have the discussion. Hey, man, can you explain this? What about that? What was going on here? I want to be able to chuckle with him and go, hey, man, that was some BS right there, buddy. Come on. I know you said it, but you couldn't have believed it. I want to have a laugh and have that discussion. And then I'd like to have serious discussions. Why did you retweet white power? You know what that's done to people in our country. You know what that does to people. You know what that does to our culture. You know how it empowers people. Man, why would you do that? Let's say it's an oversight. Can you imagine that oversight's kind of important and you can't have those? You're human, so of course you can. And he has the right to free speech, so he really can post anything he wants. But do you understand the impact? Do you feel bad about the impact? I'd just love to sit down and have a conversation. Hey, I would even have one with Marjorie Taylor Greene and say, were you for defunding the police in situations where we know they are not trained and equipped to deal with mental health issues and the outcomes of those situations are really bad? Were you concerned about any of those? Were you concerned about citizens who encountered that? Hey, look, it happens in Georgia too. Our congressional district is in Georgia. It happens in Georgia too. You concerned about any of that? If so, did you speak up? Was it crystal clear to everybody that you thought that was important? That fairness has to be there. That consideration for all citizens in America has to be there. Or it just deteriorates the credibility of us as a nation, and it certainly it tears into the credibility of democracy. And if people out there think they win by getting everything they want, I hope you lose. Progressives, I hope you lose. Far right-wing folks, I hope you lose. Marjorie Taylor Greene, you're good for entertaining people who don't understand your perspective. But I just wonder where the balance was in reallocating funds. I'm not even going to use the words defund. Reallocating funds to ways that are going to help each one of our cities. Or maybe increasing the police funds so they can do the things that they're better at and adding funds for the people who handle the mental health side. Either way, a call for solutions is what I'd like to see. Defunding the FBI because they went after one person you don't like. That's American leadership right now. That's where we are. That is why, in part, we're divided. Our leadership does it for their own personal benefit. They do it for their own party benefit. They do it to uplift themselves at the expense of who we should be as a nation. Happens every day. I'm going to end with this. Real questions. And I'll probably ask these questions more often than not. Do you mind the hate? Even if you're somebody that tweets out things that you know, let's just call them dark. Let's say they're emotional reactions, sharp, terse responses to some of the things that you see that really just get your blood boiling. Do you mind the hate? Does it bother you? Maybe your answer is, well, they hate me, so I hate them too. I don't care what. I don't care how you got yourself in that situation. The question is, do you mind the hate? Because there's a lot of it out there. The next question is obvious. Do you think it's productive? Do you think you're winning? Did you win because the Supreme Court is the way they are? Abortion is no longer a right protected by the federal government? Are there other wins that you anticipate getting that justify and then make the hate that's out there productive? Do you mind the hate? If after asking yourself and thinking about it and just questioning where you are and how you got there, if you do mind the hate, why do you take part in it? And I'm sure I'll be accused of doing the same. I don't want to. I don't want to hate anybody. I want to be able to explain it to my kids. That's the litmus test here. It's not party, it's explanation. Are my explanations biased? Well, I'm sure based on my personal experience, there is some bias. I try to be fair because I recognize my kids could have completely different opinions. They're going to grow up and be their own person, and I'm not trying to change what they believe. I don't mind telling them what I think, and I know it does influence them. But I'm just saying, I want to be able to explain things to my kids. That's the standard for me. I won't live forever. My kids will still be here. It has to be addressed for them too. So the 3 questions are simple. Do you mind the hate? Do you think it's productive? And if you do mind, why do you take part in it? Why don't you, every time you see your local congressperson post something that you find to be hateful, say, hey, and what was your proposed solution? What did you put out there? Did you meet with your Democratic counterparts and offer a specific bill or legislation that you're looking for co-sponsors on? Can you imagine if there was a wave of Americans who just kept asking that question? What did you do today for me? I don't support you, but what did you do today for me? I'm an American. I live in your district. Did you reach across the aisle to try to figure something out to make it better for me too? I would beg our leaders to lead with restraint. We aren't better divided. If you want all or nothing, I've said it enough times for you to really understand it. I hope you get nothing. Compromise is better. You don't get everything you want, but you're taking into account more people. And that matters to me more than you or me getting everything I want. It does. Work for America, not just for yourself, not just for your supporters. I'm going to say that probably daily because it makes me crazy. Anyway, it won't be for lack of trying. That thoughtful, respectful conversations can be had here. We can take on the issues that we know Americans face every day. We can take them on not from a left or a right perspective, but from a me and you perspective. We can challenge each other. We can explain to each other. We can consider, we can listen to each other to get a better understanding of how America is exactly where it is, because it can be much better. Be better, America. We can. That's it for today's show. I appreciate you tuning in to the Divided States of America show. We are here weekdays, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. We're on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and Twitter. I'd love for you to go to our Facebook group, join in the debate. I'll be posting soon the question from yesterday, which was, is part of Trump's appeal white supremacy? I can imagine there'll be quite the reaction to that. Join in that debate. And when you're ready, come on air. We can have these discussions with real people, real, thoughtful, respectful discussions about the things that divide our nation. We need to stop. Until then, can't thank you enough. I should be back tomorrow. I'll have to make that real-time decision. Are we going to talk about how bad the world is, or are we going to get ready for a weekend? We'll figure that out tomorrow. But until then, appreciate you coming here. You can always catch previous episodes of the show on YouTube at dividedstatesofamerica.show, dividedstatesofamerica.show. You can also go to Facebook or Twitter and see previous versions of the show. Thanks again for being here. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks for watching the Divided States of America show. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the channel and share this video with your family and friends.